liftoff.
Here we go. It's game time. Unforgettable.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Welcome to Sports and More, where almost anything goes. Coming to you from the marsh just outside of Edmonton, Alberta, here's your host, Dean Millard.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Nice to be in orbit.
I'll never forget seeing Wayne Gretzky, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent. At the old building, they had a strip bar across the street.
Yeah,
the Forum,
yeah.
The hotel there, and I remember they had acquired Mike Krushelnyski from Boston. It was training camp. Nowadays, as you know, Dean, you go to a morning skate, and people are tweeting out the lines.
That's
Everybody
right.
knows who's playing with who. So Wayne was there, and I ended up beside him at the bar, and I haven't told him this story because I see him now more around the Oilers. I said, Wayne, listen, he goes, I'm in a hockey pool coming up. I said, do you think Krushelnyski's going to play on your line, or like, what do you think?
How old were you, do you think?
I would have been around 18, 19.
Okay.
You know, and I said, I want to take him, but I'm not sure. And he goes, no, he's going to be on my line. I said, okay.
Do you imagine having that information and tweeting it out now?
Yeah, right, exactly, right? Now it would have been all
Wayne
over.
Gretzky in a strip club just told me that Krushelnyski's going to be on his line.
By the way, we had our backs to the stage.
That's right, yes, that's
we were
right.
at the bar facing the other way towards the bartender.
Good.
And I said, okay. And so then we had our draft, and I kind of waited because I didn't want to take him right away. There were some other, back then, guys who were getting 150, 60, 40 points.
You know, Howard Chuck is there.
There's lots of players, but I took him a little bit later, not too late, and he ended up winning me the pool. Because if I remember correctly, Mike had like 88 points that year.
A great story. Gene Principe on Wayne Gretzky strip clubs and hockey pool advice. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sports and More, episode 31, featuring Gene Principe, where almost anything goes. And yes, we've got the video set up, so hopefully everything goes well with that. Gene Principe from Rogers Sportsnet is going to be joining me on the show. That's the chair he will be in right there for those of you watching on our YouTube channel. Gene can be found on Twitter at Gene Principe. So we'll get to a conversation, a really fun one and entertaining one in just a little bit with Gene, but want to tell you about Podcast Alley. Right now at Podcast Alley, Ari Shapiro appears on the Prospects Baseball Show with myself and Jordan Blundell as we celebrate Larry Walker getting into the Baseball Hall of Fame. We also play the little pepper, some rapid fire questions with Ari. He can be found at arishapiro.ca. Jill Pollard is on the most recent episode of the Cannabis 101 podcast. That is until later tonight when another episode comes out. Jill Pollard from the Herb Life, really good conversation with her about gender in the cannabis industry. And Raylan Dane of Sundial will join me later today on an episode. You can also check out One Hitters with Raylan Dane as well. And One Timers with Gene Principe will come out later this week. All of that can be found at podcastalley.ca. And you're also could be listening to us on 12 Ounce Sports. Thank you very much for that. Live radio and TV. They've got hockey, lacrosse, basketball, futsal. It can be all found at www.12ouncesportsradio.com. You can get in touch with me at Duck Millard on Twitter. You can also get us at our website at sportsandmore.ca. And if you'd like to email me, it's sportsandmorepod@gmail.com. Stay tuned later for the Acme Meat Market trivia giveaway. You can get a gift card from Acme Meat Market. That is what is up for grabs. Easy for me to say. Go to their website, go to their shop rather, and say hi to Corey, Amanda, their wonderful staff in the Ritchie Market in Edmonton. It's at 9570 76th Avenue, and check out their website, acmemeatmarket.ca. So your hint for the interview with Gene Principe And to win that gift card from Acme Meat Market, your hint is catchphrases. Think of catchphrases that sportscasters sometimes use. That is your hint. Let's get to know Gene Principe a little bit more with the bio.
Time for the bio.
Gene Principe was born in Edmonton, Alberta, and lived on the north side until his family moved to Italy when he was 2. They moved back a year later, and Gene grew up an Edmontonian, graduating from St. Joseph High School and taking the broadcast course at NAIT. A practicum in Kamloops led to his first job in Grand Prairie as both reporter and cameraman for just over a year. 3 years in Lethbridge were followed by 3 more in Winnipeg, 3 in Toronto, and 3 more back at Edmonton with A Channel before he joined Sportsnet, where he's been the host of Oilers hockey for 19 years. Gene and his wife Karen have 3 children. Gene Principe in studio with me at Podcast Alley, and Eugene, as my brother we used to call you.
He's about the only guy that's still, other than guys that I grew up with.
Okay.
You know, they always call me that. That's what they know me as. But he's the only guy I kind of met, post 20, 22, 23. I think I was 25 when I met your brother. And he started working alongside me, or me alongside him, back at CKND in Winnipeg. But he still calls me that to this day. Yeah, and that's a long time ago. That's like 25 years ago.
He will, when we talk or whatever, he'll be like, when he talks about you, he'll be like, "How's Eugene?" or whatever. And I'm like,
that's the way.
I think this is the first time I've actually maybe ever called. I was always kind of didn't think I should call you Eugene, but I thought I'd take a chance today.
It's the full name is Eugenio. I was in the Italian culture and maybe many European cultures. The firstborn boy ends up being called his grandfather's name or his no-no's name. So, for example, my son is named after my dad. Even though my sister had kids and a boy, right? It's up to us to have the first name and then the last name.
That's pressure on the.
Yeah, I remember when my son was born. First of all, my wife felt pressure to have a boy and get it named.
Get it out of the way.
Right, get out of the way. And then I remember I'll never forget, my dad said, he goes, "I can die now." You know. And,
really? It means that much in that culture, right?
Yeah, it is. And now for me, I don't, it's okay that, listen, I'd be honored if they did, but I don't want to kind of put that burden or pressure on them. I have told them they have to be Italian names.
That's right.
But they don't have to be my Italian name.
So it can't be Frank.
Can't be. I mean, if you're going to call him Frank, you call him Franco, you call him Francesco. I mean,
Francesco. There you go.
So that's like
you could get around extending it.
You can work around it.
You shorten it to Frank if you really wanted to.
Having said that, it's always weird to me when someone gives a child a name and they're not even out of diapers and they're calling them by their short name. I'm thinking, well, why don't you just give them that name if that's what you're going to call them? But anyways, yeah. So that's the history of my name. And ironically, my father has an older brother, and he named his son Eugenio after my mother.
Okay.
So there's 2 of us.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. So you are universally known as the nicest guy in media. So let's clear things up. Do you ever get mad? Like, when was the last time you got mad about something?
Well, it's ironic that in the last few days, my wife and daughter have been to an Oiler game, and then they were somewhere else out, and a couple of people said, "Oh, your husband, your father, he's such a nice guy. He gave me time here." And then my wife looks at me and goes, "Really? They think you're that nice? Is that possible?" I do have that very unofficial title.
I think if we tried, we could make it official.
I consider myself to be a pretty nice guy. Sometimes my kids over the decades have tested my patience. But I always say to my family, I said, you are most comfortable with those around you, your wife, your kids. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, you wouldn't get upset at a stranger about something, but you might get upset at your wife because she locked you out of the house, or whatever the case might be. So my mom was a very kind person, and Again, not to, but when she passed, so many people said nice things about her that I believed, not just told because
She passed, yeah.
right? And I kind of took after her. There's so much, I don't know, bad in the world. Some really bad, some not so bad. But try and be kind. And now it's up to me to show my kids too, right? So I was taught a certain way. Now I try and show them.
It's so funny. It's so true. And I talk to my therapist all the time about Trish is the only one that sees the real me. And sometimes that's a really bad me because of some of my mental health issues. But it's so true. You are most comfortable around the people you care about the most, and you show your real self around them.
That's right.
I still think you are probably considered one of the nicest guys even at home. And it's funny. I had Ryan Rashog on this show, and I asked him about him and Dave Parker. He said they had one disagreement in their whole career. You've worked with Corey Blashill for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Corey isn't a nice guy, but he's a little bit opposite of you. He's very blunt. If he doesn't like what he says, he tells you. I can only imagine the patience you have had. And I'm not trying to bash on Corey. I'm just saying you seem to be a bit of a saint.
We are opposites, and we do attract, though, because as he always says, I'm the bad cop, I'm the good cop. He's the bad cop.
Yeah.
He's got a heart.
He really does. He really does.
He's got a bit of a sandpaper exterior.
Yeah.
But that's just who he is. And he says some things. I go, I can't believe he said that. But he gets some stuff accomplished. I go, I can't believe he accomplished that.
Right.
Because of his personality.
Yeah.
He is unlike any cameraman I've ever met. And I've worked with lots of them, because he'll go up to, we'll go into dressing rooms and he'll just start talking to players, things that I don't do. And I see a lot of media people don't do. But he's not necessarily talking about the game. He might be talking about trucks. Yeah. He might be talking about lake lots. He might be talking about anything. And so he has helped me out a lot in my career as we approach 19 years as a tandem. And
wow.
It's been incredible, because for a long time I worked with lots of different cameramen, which was okay too. But and we've never really had, a couple times I got a little bit, not even upset with him, but he just would needle me about something. But I mean, honestly, we've had a pretty smooth ride for almost 19 years in a time where there's so much change that we've been able to kind of stick together. And I guess Sportsnet must think the two of us work well or okay together, because they've kept us together for this long.
So was your first sentence or words, was it a pun? Like when you first talked, do you remember your parents saying, oh, you made a pun about the meal? Because you are famous for puns, and I love them.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know, it started in 06 after the Stanley Cup run to Game 7, and the Oilers lost, and that next year was a really tough year. Yeah. Chris Pronger was traded, and the team just went the opposite way. And I'm a born and raised Oiler fan, and I just found myself I'm the first impression of every game. Whether you like it or not, I'm the first guy you see. I'm generally the first one that talks, and so I set the tone, for lack of a better term. And I just found myself, there were just an abundance of negative numbers regarding Edmonton, whether it would be power play or penalty kill or losing streak or goals against. Look, they won 2 out of their last 20 games. You're not going to find a lot of positive numbers. But I just thought,
beginning of the decade of darkness.
Yeah, that's right. It was. You're right. And so I kind of thought, okay, let's take a different approach. People come home from work. They maybe have had a good day, but maybe they've had a bad day, and they turn on the TV to be entertained, to have some fun, to enjoy themselves. So that's kind of where it started, and then it just sort of grew from there. And thankfully, I've had numerous producers that have given me lots of latitude, and that includes my Sportsnet bosses. I get called into the quote-unquote office every once in a while, especially times have changed about what you can do on TV, what you can do anywhere. Yeah. What you could do a year ago, you might not be able to do now. And so, but they've always given me a lot of creative license to just have a few laughs. I think more people like it than not, but I would be kidding myself if I think there's a fair amount of people that don't, but they're still watched to see. I think one of the things that I've always tried to do is to have fun, make fun of myself, but I never try and make fun of
somebody else,
somebody else's results. that's not the kind of person I am. So that's not the kind of broadcaster I would be either.
Well, listen, as nice a guy as you are, even you would have people that don't like you. I mean, find me the person that everybody likes, and I'll call that person an imposter. So, but do you get, you must get lots of people coming up to you in public. You're very recognizable and try a pun on you or give you an idea. Do you like that?
Both. Yeah. I mean, it's hard sometimes. Someone will come up to you and go, give me a pun.
On the spot.
You know, like, you might be.
That's like going up to Connor McDavid and say, show me a goal.
Yeah, right. It was kind of like, make a great move right now. Yeah. So those are a little bit difficult because, someone just walks up to you and you could be at the grocery store. You might be putting, gas in the car. You might be at a kid's sporting event.
Give me a pun about that gas.
Yeah, like they'll just kind of... So, and sometimes I'll respond. Sometimes I'll say, I'm just saving them for the broadcast. But people certainly give them to me too. I mean, they'll fire them off to me, whether it's via social media or when they see me, they think, hey, I was thinking this, and fill in the blank. And you know what? A lot of them are really good. People have great ideas. I kind of say about puns that anyone can do them. I just decided to do them and do them and do them and do them.
I think they're great. I love how you started off with it. I used to love how Ron McLean ended Coach's Corner.
And that's that would be, I think, it's funny because when you deal with some young people and Ron McLean will deliver a great pun and they'll say, what's McLean taking Gene Principe stuff for? And I'm thinking, hang on, you obviously are young and that's okay.
That's fine, yeah.
But you may not realize that, Ron actually is the guy that, imitation is the finest form of flattery. And so I would watch Ron week after week on Hockey Night in Canada and his Coach's Corner, and he would always finish. I mean, who wasn't hanging around, A, to hear what Don said, and B, to hear how Ron finished it. And I always liked that, and then I just started doing it, and then started using props for stuff instead of just sort of standing there. And it was
incorporating people on the road. I guess you're bringing them in to help and holding the mics and stuff.
What? Just using what you have around you at home. It's one of the advantages of having 3 kids is we always had stuff in the house that you could kind of formulate and use and go, okay, this might be a bit of a stretch, but I can use this to make this point. So I try and still make the point of whatever it is I'm trying to get across, but with a pun, with a prop, with a little bit of lightheartedness instead of just looking straight in the camera, delivering a newscast. We got enough bad news. Let's try and have a little bit of fun, and hopefully people like it.
It distinguishes yourself in this business. You do have to do things. I don't think you should go over the line and just to make a point, but you do have to stand out. Listen, I know as much as anybody about the cutbacks in this industry. You got to be able to stand out and say, we need this guy.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's what the intention wasn't to sort of find a niche. I felt like my sportscasting was my niche, but then you kind of get angled towards that, and that's listen, if you are Alexander Ovechkin, and what do people say about him? One-timer, he scores goals. If you're Connor McDavid, fast, incredibly, you get sort of these 2 or 3 labels or descriptions or adjectives, and we end up with them in our real life. And in my case, my broadcast life. So it's been great. Like, I really appreciate it. I find that when people like you, they'll come say hello and talk to you. When people don't, they'll kind of give you a sneer, or they'll kind of...
No, they text you from an unnamed source or a fake Twitter account. That's what they do when they don't like you now. Before it was they would avoid you.
Yeah.
Now it's keyboard warriors that can say anything when they don't have an identity.
And what I love, though, is honestly, ever since the advent of social media, and especially Twitter, I'll come back, and I'd be lying if I say, especially after certain openings, I think, well, what's the reaction? What's the reaction, right? And I'll look, and one guy will say, oh, that was great. I really loved it. Fantastic. And the next I go, you're an idiot. I don't know what you're doing on TV. And I as long as it's like that, I don't mind, right? Because we all have our kind of personal opinions of what we like and what we don't like.
So you obviously get to travel with the Edmonton Oilers, and I'd imagine this year is a much different atmosphere. I did the post-game show for 4 years when they were awful, and people, it didn't matter if you said they played well but lost, you were a homer, and if they didn't play well and you called it out, you're too negative. It doesn't matter. just so I can't imagine what the being around post game would have been like over the last while compared to this year.
Yeah, it certainly was. Listen, I grew up on the north side of Edmonton. I remember, I'll never forget once at the old arena, God love him, Don Whitman came downstairs from calling a playoff game. Back then, I didn't have a lot of money, and we got in. We kind of used to buy one ticket, but then the guy would come open an exit door, and then we'd get in. Right?
We used to do that at weekend games.
Right. So I would get into the odd game, but we certainly couldn't afford to buy 2 tickets to a playoff game. But I remember Don walking down from the catwalk at Rexall in his powder blue Hockey Night in Canada jacket. I remember I was about 14, 15. I said, one day I want to wear one of those jackets, because I just thought, oh, this is incredible to see him and to just see what he's been able to accomplish. And hockey in this country, curling is big, football is big, soccer has its moments. I mean, there's some great sports, rugby, lacrosse. But hockey is the one that I think we identify for the most part and are attached to the most.
Right.
And so it's been fantastic opportunity for me, especially to come home and work in my hometown. It's always something that I wanted to do. It's hard to kind of call your shot like a player who wants to play and pick a city. In any sport, I had
John Tavares going back to Toronto, right?
Right. I know we make fun of those, the pajamas, the Maple Leaf
but it's
pajamas.
True. You probably had Oiler stuff I did when I was a kid, Jet stuff, things like that. Yeah.
I mean, that's what we are connected to, right? I mean, I'll never forget seeing Wayne Gretzky, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent. At the old building, they had a strip bar across the street.
Yeah.
The Forum. Yeah. The hotel there, and I remember they had acquired Mike Krushelnyski from Boston. It was training camp. Nowadays, as you know, Dean, you go to a morning skate, and people are tweeting out the lines.
That's
Everybody
right.
knows who's playing with who. So Wayne was there, and I ended up beside him at the bar, and I haven't told him this story because I see him now more around the Oilers. I said, Wayne, listen, he goes, I'm in a hockey pool coming up. I said, do you think Krushelnyski's going to play on your line, or like, what do you think?
How old were you, do you think?
I would have been around 18, 19.
Okay.
And I said, I want to take him, but I'm not sure. And he goes, no, he's going to be on my line. I said, okay.
Do you imagine having that information and tweeting it out now?
Yeah, right, exactly, right? Now it would have been all
Wayne
over.
Gretzky in a strip club just told me that Krushelnyski's going to be on his line.
By the way, we had our backs to the stage.
That's
just
right,
so you
yes,
know.
that's
We were
right.
at the bar facing the other way towards the bartender.
Good.
And I said, okay. And so then we had our draft, and I kind of waited because I didn't want to take him right away. There were some other, back then, guys were getting 150, 60, 40 points.
Howard Chuck is there.
There's lots of players, but I took him a little bit later, not too late, and he ended up winning me the pool. Because if I remember correctly, Mike had like 88 points that year, coming from a Boston Bruins where he hadn't had that kind of success. But thrown with Wayne Gretzky, and Wayne has been, listen, I grew up in Edmonton, and Wayne is one of the great guys. One of the neat transitions for me was to go from a fan to a fan who happens to hold a microphone, who got to meet and talk to Wayne Gretzky and Paul Coffey and Glenn Anderson and Grant Fuhr and Kevin Lowe and Craig McTavish and Jari Kurri and Esa Tikkanen and Charlie Huddy and Bill Ranford and so on and so forth. So I always felt like I can't believe that the young me would end up being the old me standing beside these guys.
Paul Coffey to me was Fonzie. He was the coolest guy. I always just felt like he could shoot a puck at a jukebox and start it or something like that. Like and I told him that one time, and he kind of looked at me, but I'm like, dude, you just always seemed so calm, cool, and collected. Out of all those guys, he just seemed like he was the most. Well, Grant Fuhr was probably the most laid back, but Paul Coffey just seemed like he was so calm and cool and collected.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think one of the things I found out over the years, listen, that Wayne was a leader and Mark was a leader and Kevin. There are lots of leaders on that team, but I didn't realize how important a leader Paul was until years later when you hear, the team comes through in the 1984 reunion in 2014, or the Heritage Classic, when you start seeing some of these guys around and you start talking to them a bit more, and you start talking to them off camera, just chatting about the old days. And Paul, first of all, I agree with you. Like the Fonz, I mean, he was cool. He was definitely cool, and he skated as fast as the Fonz was on his motorcycle there. He was,
or his water skis when he jumped the shark.
Water skis, that's right. Yeah, right. Good memory.
4 o'clock, Brandon, Manitoba, every day. I would come home from school and watch the clock. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the Happy Days logo.
Happy Days.
So as for this year's Oilers team, is there a guy like that, do you think, or right now that's maybe an understated leader on this team?
Yeah, I think I was going to go with the cool factor, Darnell Nurse.
Okay, that's a good one,
So
yeah.
let's start with that.
Sure.
But I think he's, again, we first of all, Mike Smith has been, I think, a great addition, not only as a goaltender, but as a leader. And I think you work your way around the room. I think Leon's got his leadership skills. Connor has his. I think Zach Cassian has his. And I just think that Darnell's one of those guys that he's kind of a skilled guy, but really in the trenches too. I think he can kind of, this applies to not just him, but I think there's a respect factor for Darnell. And listen, he comes from an incredibly skilled, talented family.
Certainly.
And I think that there is some growth that he's had from his father playing in the CFL, from his sister playing for Canada's Olympic team.
His uncle in the NFL.
In the NFL.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just, listen, I learned how to make sausage in Supersata because my uncles and my dad. I learned what it's like to pour cement because of people around me.
I learned that I should stay at a jail because 2 of my uncles were jail guards, and they told me what happened there.
Well, see, there you go, right? We learn from people, and sometimes I think people around us, sometimes I don't think we know what we've learned till later. And so I think Darnell, to me, would be sort of an understated, fiery, composed leader with lots of abilities and willing to do about anything to help his team out. Oscar Klefbom's another guy. So, I think the team has a lot of leaders, but he'd be one of those guys. He's the cool guy, but he's not just the cool guy. He's the important guy in the room.
So there's not that maybe one alpha male like maybe Mark Messier was at that point. It's kind of shared because Connor McDavid doesn't strike me, and you see him in a different light than most of us do when you're traveling. We mostly get the sound bites and the scrums, and we know he's doesn't say a lot, and I think that he's very guarded. So I don't envision him standing up and giving a rah-rah speech ever.
You know what?
Maybe he'd stand up and get upset or something.
Right. I think, first of all, Connor's leadership is lead by example.
That's right. Yeah.
For sure, and that's more than okay. To sort of jog the memories of some of your older listeners or viewers is, when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen, right? And I think Connor's the kind of guy that he's not going to stand up at the end of the second period when they're down 3-1 to Vegas with this big speech. He'll pick his moments, he'll pick his spots. But I just think, and the other thing I think, when you watch Connor, I believe his body language is very open to interpretation on. He kind of, for all the things he may not say, I think he shows when he's on the ice. And so I think his leadership can be shown by his actions, sometimes more than his words. I think Leon's the kind of guy, if Leon stands up in the room, people are going to listen, and he might be a little more, maybe I'm married German, that's why I think it, but forceful with his words. Connor
more blunt.
I think Connor's just not the type to, he's always he wants to talk about the team always before himself.
He always deflects from himself.
Always. And so I think to be a good leadership group, you can't have all the same leaders.
It's sometimes frustrating, I think, from a reporter's point of view, trying to do a profile on Connor McDavid and get him to talk about himself. It's just not in his DNA.
Yeah, I for all the athletes that I've covered, first of all, that's a character trait in a lot of them. Their greatness is not something they want to talk about. If you're at the Hockey Hall of Fame and you're getting inducted, of course you've got, that's, and I know sometimes once I joked with him because he had I think it was to start last season, he had points in 9 straight goals, and it was a new NHL record, and he answered the question like briefly, and I said, Connor, I'm sorry, this is a National Hockey League record over 100 years old, and I followed it up. And afterwards, I said to him, listen, Connor, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. I said, but this is something that's never been done in the history of the National Hockey League. This isn't a 3-game goal scoring streak. So, I don't want you to feel like I need you to talk about yourself, but there are times with what you do that you are that story for 1 or 2 questions. He goes, no, that's okay. That's like, but he just doesn't want to talk about, wow, look at me. Wow, look at me. But what he does on the ice, it's
impossible not to.
It's impossible not to, right? So, but it's such a humble, and listen, if you get to know his parents, and I'm not going to suggest that we play bridge with the McDavids or anything, but over the course of these years, you see it. His dad is a quiet, humble, strong characteristics, And his mom is more the easygoing, laughing. The first time I met Connor, two times, like I met him at the Ball Diamond, as you know, with the draftees.
Right.
They go
They do
to
batting
baseball.
practice.
They do batting practice. So I did an interview with him. First time I met him, cameraman double clicked. It wasn't Corey, by the way. So we had to redo it. So I went up to him and he redid it. And about 3 hours later, we were in line at the hotel. We were separate lines, but about the same. And I had to change my key and he had to do something. And I said, no, you go ahead. You're like the first overall pick here tomorrow night. So why don't I let you go? And because Edmonton's going to draft you and I probably want to make some inroads here early. He's like, no, you go. I'm like, no, Connor, you go. No, you go. You go first. You go. Like, and I know it's some people might go, oh, it's kind of a silly thing. But I thought, here's this 18-year-old who I gave 3 or 4 opportunities to go in front of me. And he wouldn't go. He was like, basically, until you go, I'm not going.
Mm-hmm.
So does that make him a huge, great leader in the world of hockey? No, but it tells you a little bit about his upbringing and his roots and his background. And I think we see that in him. I notice when I see him after a game, he goes to his mom, of course, and, hugs and kisses and hello. And then he sidles up to his dad and it's a little
Maybe talk
more,
hockey, maybe.
Yeah, a little more like I think a father can be your friend, your dad, your sounding board. It can be a lot of different things. And so I like the way Connor is and the fact that I'd rather have him talk less about himself than talk too much about himself.
Yeah, well, that's the hockey way too, right?
Right.
Hockey players seem a little bit more humble and things like that. And I always say, wow, I couldn't believe Connor McDavid surprised me again, like with the Morgan Riley move. And then you hear a story about him opting out of major knee surgery that could have changed his career, the story that came out recently. And they went the other way, which was probably a lot harder and a lot riskier, but, looks like it's paid off. I mean, this just amazes me even more that he has the maturity to say, listen, all this stuff going on with my knee and surgery could have a major impact. I'm going to take a chance on this. I'm going to bet on myself.
It further proof he's not human. I mean, to think of what he had in front of him. And I got wind of this situation and this Sportsnet special a little bit in advance. I didn't know about the seriousness of the injury. I just knew that this was going to be coming out soon around the All-Star weekend. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I just, and I don't know how they kept it so quiet in this day and age.
That's the most amazing part, isn't it?
It is. And I think that just shows you the kind of guy Connor is. Like, when I was getting ready to interview him somewhere after the trip to Toronto where they were there for 4 days.
Right.
And I said, so when you're in Toronto for that, this is just us talking, right? I said, when you're in Toronto for that many days, do you start to sort of get to from your best friends to your cousins, aunts,
expand
uncles,
out,
do you start to go to your high school, junior high buddies? He goes, no. I stay still within my group. I'm not,
the team.
The guy who was in grade 6 that called me and said, hey, do you want to go for coffee or get a bite to eat? Chances are no. He's got his
That's an
hockey team.
off-season thing.
He's got his off-ice team. And that's just the way he is. And I think that, I hope I'm not, knock on wood, I hope I'm not jinxing him, but I think Connor McDavid, as long as he's in the NHL, we're not going to hear or read or see any stories.
Well, what have you ever heard negative about Sidney Crosby?
Totally. And he's an incredible role model for all the comparisons between the two on the ice and who's better. And, I mean, Sidney does it right. And I know when Pittsburgh was here just before Christmas, he was still injured at that time. And he was supposed to go see a little girl in the hospital when the team made their hospital visits.
Here?
In Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So he was supposed to go see this group of kids, and in particular one girl, but he was rehabbing. He couldn't go. So he ended up going while the team was in Edmonton. He went. He took her out to a movie. And I'm just like, okay, that's a well brought up young man. And it just, to me, if I'm his dad or mom, I love what he's doing. Sure, it's great he's making all that money, but that would fill my heart with pride to know that my son is doing these things, not for attention, but just to help out a little girl who's sick and not feeling well and could use a boost.
All right, little just straight hockey talk about this team in general. There's been some really great things this year. There's been low points, but not as many low points as the first half of last year or years past. What do you think the biggest difference is? And that might be hard because there's a new GM, there's a new coach, there's a new player in James Neal, there's a new goalie in Mike Smith. There's a lot of new to this team. But why do you think it's working as well as it has been?
Well, I'll start with the GM and the coach. I mean, I think that, Ken came in and he traded Milan Lucic, which was a big move for James Neal, as you mentioned, and James has fit in. And I think by the time the season's over, he's going to have, 25, maybe 30 goals. Hard to predict for sure. I like that Ken went out and hired Dave Tippett. I felt like when I saw Dave Tippett and Ken Holland sitting at a table to announce the hiring of the new head coach of the Edmonton Oilers, Oiler fans just went, oh, okay. We got two guys that are proven track records, and this makes me feel comfortable where things are going. I think Dave instituted defense will help and will allow us to score. I think that's one of the hardest things. I still don't believe it.
To convince people?
Convince people that if you play defense, it's going to lead to offense.
Because they always think, no, I got to be going the other way all the time, like cherry picking or something.
Right. I've coached, I've played sports. I'm thinking, I never believed that, but it's true. It's true right now, the way they're playing defense.
Good defense creates turnovers. You go the other way, example,
and
right?
so it's worked. So I love what Dave's done. I like what Ken's done, tinkering, having certain, restraints. So they did their part. Then the team has come back. Connor's been incredible. Leon's been incredible. I think we're going to have to point to steadiness on the blue line and goaltending, because last year Leon potted 50 goals and Connor had 116 points, and it didn't take.
And they were still fishing pucks out of the back of their net. Right.
So the firm belief, and I think that these players understand that, if we take care of one end, we'll be able to take care of the other. And I just think that the goaltending has been solid. Even if one of them goes in a bit of a dip, the other one picks them up. Mm-hmm. And whether it's the 2 on, 2 off like they did earlier, or whether a guy gets on a run, that's working. The blue line, Adam Larson gets hurt early. Matt Benning gets hurt a little later. But here comes Ethan Bear. Here comes Caleb Jones. Here comes Oscar Klefbom, who's playing like either is a number one defenseman or pretty darn close. Mm-hmm. So that's taking care of that. And then you got depth score. Josh Archibald.
The other day when he made that pass to McDavid, I had to rewind to see who it was.
It was like that
sauce pass was great.
Like a Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl pass. Riley Sheehan has started to pitch in. I mean, everyone's just like, we all have roles. And if you can, and I think that's what Dave has done. And it's not reinventing anything, but I think he's given guys, this is your role. These are the things I want you to do. If you do anything outside of that, that's a bonus. But if you can do these things, I'm covered. This is what I need, covered. And listen, who doesn't like to win? Especially some of these guys that have been around for a little while. The losing has gotten old fast. And I mean, you got 2 top point getters. You got a playoff position in the offering potentially, and you've got a team that really gets along. So far, so good heading into, the final, 1/3 of the season.
And you have a Battle of Alberta again.
Oh my goodness.
Like, I don't know how you guys managed to finagle this so that the rematch of this is the first game after the break on Sportsnet.
Bring it on.
I think it's a national game,
is
it?
I think they've, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll find out after the break, but I think they've turned what was more of a kind of regional
why wouldn't they, right?
into a national one.
So let's talk about it. That first game was Hockey Night in Canada, Saturday night game, and I guess you don't get a whole lot of chance to give your opinion on the broadcast. So let's hear it from you. What did you think of Tkachuk Kassian?
Well, it was interesting because so many people jumped on Twitter and had their opinions. And it's a little bit different when you work in a market that has the 2 teams. So, for example, if Edmonton this happened against Matthew Tkachuk played for Carolina, let's say.
That's right.
I'm not saying the people in Carolina can't see your work, but it's different when you're standing there out front talking about something. Listen, would I love to, in my opening, have boxing gloves, have a rag and a doll, a box of turtles? I'd love to do that. But this goes back to kind of respecting the players in the game.
Yeah.
And also me not wanting to get fired. And I just, it's a tough one because I think if Matthew Tkachuk was on the Oilers,
people would love him.
They would. How would you not? Now, I'm not saying they're going to agree with everything.
There
he
was a
does.
guy like Matthew Tkachuk on the Oilers. His name was Ken Linsman.
Yeah,
His
that's
nickname
right.
was the Rat.
The Rat.
And people
You're right.
loved him.
Yeah.
Esa Tikkanen
They loved
wasn't the nicest player
No,
either.
I know.
You hate those guys when they're opposition.
Right.
If Matthew Tkachuk was traded for tomorrow, you know how many jerseys would be sold in Oiler colors?
I agree 100%. You know, and on the other side, so he does what he does. I love Zach Kassian. I love the story of a guy whose life was in a shambles and was maybe one drink or one wrong turn or one gathering somewhere. Who knows where it could have went. I got nothing but time for this guy. He's worked his way into a father, a husband, and a really well-liked player. I think probably the most well-liked player in his own dressing room. He hits, he fights, he takes care of his teammates.
Scores.
He scores. He does it all, right? He's a power forward. So it's kind of tough because the fan in me, I know what would say. The broadcaster in me is trying to play it a little more even. I mean, Tkachuk, I think he's fought 7 times, I believe, in his National Hockey League career. One thing I want to check from the old Winnipeg Jets days is I wonder how many times his father
Keith,
fought in the early part
Well,
of his
you
career.
watched Keith.
I know.
You were in that
Yeah.
heyday in Winnipeg at CKND,
Yeah,
which
in
we'll
the
get
old
to in a
days,
bit.
yeah.
But
So
that jersey right there?
yeah, I see that. That does, I
See, this
remember-
is the
Milt Stegall?
Bombers,
Oh,
the
yeah,
Jets,
yeah.
the 2 teams that you covered, and
Yeah.
of course you've been on Hockey Night in
Yeah,
Canada.
on
So
Hockey
this
Night
is
in
laid
Canada.
out for you tonight.
I remember
today.
27 years to get on Hockey Night in Canada, and the Oilers lost 7-1 to Chicago. I thought, I didn't even get a chance to interview an Oiler. I was very disappointed. Luckily, I've had more opportunities. When I look at that Winnipeg Jets jersey, I think of John Paddock crying when the team
And
left.
Eddie Olczyk. I'm bringing
Eddie
it back
Olczyk,
to
I'm bringing it
Winnipeg.
back to Winnipeg.
Chris King, I remember, was a big part.
Yeah.
I was in Winnipeg living at that time. The 900 block of Ingersoll, if you remember Winnipeg, it was the northern, wasn't the greatest area.
Yeah.
We were just close to moving out, and basically we just sat there in silence after the end of that game when they were doing the rounds.
Yeah.
We were like, oh my goodness, this is
Yeah.
it.
I guess lucky broadcast wise, I moved the August of 95.
Oh, so you weren't there in
So
96.
I just
Yeah,
missed
yeah.
it because at that point they knew it was the last season.
Right.
But I got a job in Toronto, so I was lucky enough to sort of,
Right.
move on in that way. But Kassian and Tkachuk, I think it's great theater and dramatics. I don't want anyone to get hurt, no matter what happens. Because when that starts to happen, I get things, people get hurt playing hockey, but I just don't want anything
Revenge.
to happen.
You don't want to see another Todd Bertuzzi incident,
We definitely don't want that. But I got to tell you, I love Zach as long as a summer day in Edmonton. I mean, I just look at that guy and I just got so much respect for him. And he's also very scary. Like, I know
When he
there's
gets
tough
those
guys,
eyes going?
There's tough guys around the
Yeah.
league. Don't get me wrong, but he may have the scariest eyes in the National
Yeah.
Hockey League. When he looks at you with that, and I'm just like, whoa.
I'm good.
You know,
I'm good.
okay, whatever.
No,
you want,
I
Mr.
might turtle
Kassian.
too. I'm not
Hey,
sure.
listen, that's why I've for the amount of fight, I haven't been in a fight since grade 5, so I'm not one to suggest what a guy should or shouldn't do. There's not even the code, but there's a certain amount of respect that players want to have for each other. So I think if they're adhering to that, but I tell you what, it makes for a great Battle of Alberta. I mean, everyone and anyone is going to be watching that to see if anything happens.
Right.
or
Did you win
not.
the fight?
I actually lost it. I
Okay.
lost it to Vince Romano, and I ended up, I don't remember how, but I had a lump on my chin area. So I was 0 for 1 and I stopped there. I retired at that point.
Vince Romano?
Yeah.
Sounds like it could have been a wrestling name. Like that's
Yeah,
like a good wrestling name
Yeah,
already.
I subsequently have seen him many times, with
No
soccer.
fights?
No fights.
Okay,
no fights.
good,
I
good.
might win it this time. I'm not sure. I'm bigger than Vince
All
now,
right.
but back then he won.
The quotes that came out after that. I mean, Leon Draisaitl saying,
Yeah.
I'm not going to play
probably
with him.
just-
Like,
yeah, I'd leave the
I just love it. Now, oftentimes this is built up and there's nothing there.
Right.
This doesn't seem to be the case. This seems like, Kassian got suspended for 2
Yeah.
games, and, depending on who you talk to, the Flames might have said something to Matthew Tkachuk about this.
Right.
So this seems like there's going to be a resolution in some way, whether it's just a fight or something.
Yeah, people believe that if Matthew lines up beside Zach and just drops the gloves, this will all go away. Possibly, but if in the second period he hits someone like he hit Zach, it's coming right back. So I don't, people have different theories. I don't think it's going to be as explosive
As we think.
as we think, But I also don't think it's going to be as tame where, there's all this talk and then nothing happens. I think there's going to be a middle area, and it may depend on the officials as to whether it goes more to explosive or more to tame. But I just can't believe that 60 or 65. Well, if it goes into overtime, I don't think anything will happen. But in that 60 minutes, I can't see something not happening. Big hits, possible fights. I don't know. I'm not suggesting a line brawl. I mean, I don't know what will happen, but I think something will. But then they turn around and play 3 days later again? Like, this is, we waited all this time to see these two teams play, and now they're playing. And listen, give Matthew Tkachuk credit might not be the word, but
kudos,
something. Give him something for helping ignite, but give something more to Zach. Listen, I've seen many players suspended. I've seen many players talk after being suspended.
Steve Downey and Rafi Torres were getting suspended for those hits.
Right.
When they first started cracking down. I don't know why that hit is now okay.
I don't know about that. And I think, when Zach said, well, George Peros told me those hits are okay. Speaking of the eyes, he's kind of going, oh, okay. So now I know what's okay.
That's right.
Zach, after he got suspended, didn't back up. I love Mark Spector said, would you do anything over different? No. I was just like, oh, wow. Like most 99% of the guys would go, well, maybe I over whatever they would say. Not Zach. He believes in what he believes in. And so he's going to tell people that.
First meaningful Battle Alberta games in 30 years.
Wow.
You think?
It's been a long time.
You go back to 1990, early 90s, because either the Oilers were good, the Flames were good, they both weren't good.
Yeah.
Now they're battling for a playoff spot. What do you think a playoff matchup would be like? It almost happened in 06.
Yeah,
remember, everybody thought was it the Ducks that were done?
Yeah, they were.
And Ron Wilson was even like, everybody's counting us out, looking for the Battle of Alberta.
Right, and then they came back.
They rallied.
And it avoided the.
What do you think it would be
final.
like?
I mean, I think it would be
in the social media age. It might be nuts.
You know what, Dean? That's a great way to put it. I mean, if we thought the battles back in the 80s were nuts, now add to you already see all the stuff that's gone on just off of Matthew Tkachuk and Zach Kassian, all the stuff on social media. I can't believe how many creative people are out there who spend the time and effort on
these memes and gifs and everything.
I mean, I just laugh. It's incredible to me.
Oilers Nation started selling a red turtle. And that's creating money for charity. Yes. The billboard, I think that they were going to put, I don't know if it is up.
No, I think they're supposed to go up right close to the 29th.
But that's also going to get some money for charity. So this is all, at least something good is going to come out of it. And we've revamped the Battle of Alberta. There are probably hockey fans that are going to start watching the Oilers and Flames again because they were sick of it before. I think this is, as you mentioned, as long as nobody gets hurt, this is a really good thing for the game.
Yeah, and it's funny because you kind of forget, they're tied in points. And when we're focusing on Zach and Matthew. But I think it should be great theater. And usually in theater, unless you break a leg literally, there's no damage. So let's just hope everyone kind of gets out of it safe and sound.
Okay, so the first time I really knew who you were was working at CKND with my brother. But just fast forward a bit. This is how nice of a person you were. You were in A Channel. I sent you a tape, and then I phoned you. You answered the phone in a movie to talk to me about my tape. I mean, no offense, but most other guys are just saying, I'm not talking to this guy about this. I'm watching a movie. But that's how great you were. You always were helpful to me. Who helped you on your way up?
That's a good question. I think that I'm going to kind of start at the beginning or at the back end. But I remember being in Lethbridge and Derek DeBolt, who worked at Global TV for a while. Derek saw something in me, allowed me to get hired in Lethbridge, and it was the summer of 1990 when I started in sports full time. So that's pushing 30 years now, I guess, coming up to 30 years. And then when I went to Winnipeg, and Joe Pascucci, who was both your brother's boss and my boss, I thought Joe had a great eye for talent. Not in the sense I was a great talent, but he had an eye for taking someone and then molding them and helping them get better. And then I look at guys that I've worked with, Larry Isaac, the producer in the truck, Don Metz. I've had so many people help me along the way. So now at almost 53 in the back six, I guess, maybe not the back nine, but the back six of my broadcasting career, I really feel it's important to help people, to give them a push, to give them a boost, to answer their phone calls during a movie, to answer their emails, to respond to their tweets, because there's so many people that helped me get to where I am, that now it's about helping others get to where they want to get. And it takes a lot of people to be successful, to help you along the way. If you're not a Connor McDavid talent, and even Connor had people along the way, just someone has to listen to you, has to watch your
There's
tape.
no draft for broadcasters to come out and say, this is the number one broadcasting prospect, right?
There's no teams that go, okay, he's our property.
Right,
You got to work for it. And so I've been lucky. I've mixed some hard work, some skill, lots of luck, and maybe a dash of niceness into this formula that's worked for me. And so now I always, even with my own kids, I say, it's your time now. It's your time to find out what you want to be, how you want to get there, and once you're there, how you're going to succeed. And so I really I'm a big fan of helping out people. And I mostly, no welders are coming to me or plumbers. I get broadcast kids, right? So there sometimes they'll go, thanks for, I didn't think you would. That's what I should be doing.
Right.
I shouldn't be avoiding you. I shouldn't be not calling you back. I should not be emailing you back. I should be helping you out, so that one day, somewhere down the road, I might meet you somewhere and you go, remember back in 2012, I called you, I was at Nate, and now you're working at wherever. So yeah, I want to try and give back and help people out.
Well, it's definitely a changing business, as evidence of what I'm doing here, as opposed to television and radio of my past. So what advice would you give someone today? I mean, I remember the days grinding away, making VHS tapes in the boardroom of the CKX building in Brandon. Like, the cleaning lady would let me in to use the VHS, and you'd make your 10 tapes and you'd send them out to Gene or send them out. Well, CKX is no longer there. Yeah. RDTV is no longer there. The first two stations I worked at in television are gone. I don't know where kids out of school go to these days, because I was always told you don't start in a major market. So what would your advice? We still need broadcasters, but just there doesn't seem to be as many jobs. Yeah,
I think, one of the things I have always said to these young kids or older adults, depending who it is, just get that first job. Get that first job, whatever it is, wherever it is.
Take anything.
Just take anything. And I found...
you started in news. I started in news. We both wanted to do sports, but you had to get your foot in the door.
You had to get your foot in the door. I've gone to school and seen some very creative, talented people who wanted to start in a major market, and it just wasn't there for them. And before you knew it, they were no longer doing it because they couldn't break through. Instead of going geographically and size-wise backwards, but getting a chance to do many things along the way, like you did, to get you into Edmonton, just like you did. I just think, I always say, listen and learn. Like, when you get going on something, if you want some advice, then listen to that advice and take that advice and take out of it what you want. But for me, along the way, I did, as much as we talk for a living, my brother-in-law always says, I can't remember how he words it, but there's a reason God gave you two ears and one mouth, right? And while that's simple, kind of true, right? That means you should be listening, in theory, twice as much as you're talking. And there's so much to be learned by listening. And so I like that. Also, this isn't something that we needed to do, even though you're younger than me, be very diversified. We didn't have to, we could kind of find a niche, an area, and go that route, and it would carry us to where it carried us. Nowadays, that's a little bit, it's a little bit different. So I would say just be open-minded. But I've been saying this for almost 33 years that I've been in broadcasting, is just get that first job anywhere, anyhow. And then you can go, you got something on your resume, or I guess it's a link now to your resume. And then you can work from there at your own pace. If you're in a rush, you can try and push it. See if you can, accomplish. When I got out of school at 20, I wanted to be in Toronto by 25. Yeah. I didn't get there. I got there at 28. But I got there.
That's pretty good, yeah.
But, so I didn't achieve my goal, but I did a little bit later, right? So you set your goals. I remember being in Lethbridge for 3 years going, I can't get a job. I can't get out of I
I felt like I was in Brandon and Red Deer forever. And at times wanted to quit because I'm never getting out of there.
Right. Just, I think that sometimes that, before you know it, something that seems to have lasted so long ends. And then when you look back, you go, you know what? I actually learned a lot being there. Maybe I needed to be there for those 2-3 years, whatever it was. But I got lots of time for up and coming, I can't really help too many directors and technicians, but I got lots of time for up and coming broadcasters who, one day might be on a podcast and someone says to them, hey, who'd you grow up watching and liking? Maybe it's Gene Principe or Dean Millard or Ryan Rashog or, I'm going to pick Brian Mudrick or,
whoever,
pick a guy. Or in my case, I mentioned, Howard Cosell, Ron McLean. So yeah, that would be nice because that's what we should do.
Well, for me, it was you and Darren.
Yeah.
That literally, I thought I'm going to get into broadcasting and I'm going to go work on Sportsline. And those shows don't exist anymore.
No.
I got to host one in Regina and at times in Edmonton when I first moved here. But that half-hour show was so great. And how I got to know you was, and this is how technology worked back in the day. You guys would give a trivia question, throw it a break, and then you guys were physically taking the calls, and I would call in, and the answer would be, who scored the game-winning goal in the 1970 Stanley Cup? And Darren would be like, Sportsline trivia, and I'd be like, Silken Lauman. And Darren would say, shut up and quit calling. And you would say, keep calling. I like this because it got Darren mad. So that's how I got to know you, like fake trivia answers. Me and my buddies thought it was hilarious.
I remember
my parents literally said, stop calling your brother. This is his job.
I remember those days, and it's true. We'd come on the show. We'd have like 3 different video headlines. We'd come on and kind of set the table. Here's what we got coming up. But first, before we go to break, here's Sportsline trivia question. We go to break, and the phone, your brother and I would be sitting beside each other. We'd have a little stool or table with a phone, and we'd just go, okay, who's going to answer? And I would take one, or he would take one, and we just go, that's how we answered the phone, and that's how we got our trivia answers. And I remember, I go, who's that? And he goes, that's my brother. It's Dean, my brother Dean. And I always thought that was great. I mean, not to get too, I never had a brother. I had one sister, and I
could have given you one of mine.
I could, you're right. I could have borrowed one.
Yeah.
I just thought it was kind of neat that, you were watching, that you were calling in, that you were kind of pissing them off too. I thought the whole.
But that's how I learned. I was studying. I'm like, these guys are the best. Like there was so much funny stuff. First of all, when Joe would throw to Barry Burns, rest in peace, Barry, it was tape. Barry's things, and I would always love it because Joe would be like, let's go back to Barry Burns for the news update. Barry, sorry, we let the air out of your tires. And Barry would be like, thanks Joe.
I know.
Like, would Joe ever get in trouble for that?
I know. No,
I thought that was
great.
hilarious.
That was a time where, well, the world was different, and the world is better in many ways now, but it's also more sensitive. We have to be very careful what we do and what we say and how we treat people, and that's appropriate. But back then, like, it was just a kind of a license to almost do whatever you want. And when you do whatever you want, just like with your parents, sometimes you get in trouble.
Yeah.
But it was such a ability to be creative. And I just really enjoyed the chance to be entertaining or try to be entertaining with sports. And so it's, and I look at that, and I started there in 1992. So we're, 28 years ago, and I'm still kind of doing what we were able to do and learned off Joe and off your brother. And here we are still having the same kind of fun.
I honestly think you and Darren are the two favorite. I really liked Michael Landsberg and the one guy that he was on with at one point on TSN. I can't remember his name, but you and Darren, I thought, had such great chemistry. And I'm not blowing smoke up your butt here. I mean, the time you guys, I think it was Michel Goulet had a concussion, and you guys wore a helmet to clean the studio. And did you whack Darren?
I whacked him on that. Yeah, there was some kind of a not a survey, but like information had come out
about helmet safety.
About helmet safety, And back then, those helmets had they kind of had the plastic, and that was about it. So and then we said, okay, what are we going to do? And we just talked amongst each other, and we came up with this. And Darren was like spray cleaning the desk and wiping it, and I brought up a stick and I just whacked him on the back of the head, And it was.
I think he still
great.
has a concussion from that. Seriously,
He's not out of protocol yet.
But it was so funny.
Yeah, and you think of doing that back in the early to mid '90s. It's a long time ago, and there are some people who still maybe not doing that exactly, but that kind of stuff. And so I miss. One of the things I miss. I kind of work. I don't work alone. I work with guys like Kevin Quinn and Drew Remenda and Louis DeBrusque, all great guys and great broadcasters. Those are the sort of three main guys I work with. For Sportsnet, I get to work a lot with Mark Spector, and I enjoy that and appreciate that. But generally, when I'm doing my openings and stuff, I'm by myself, so I kind of miss that back and forth that you
well,
have
the banter was so good between you guys. You guys were roommates. You guys, became pretty good friends.
Yeah, and here we are still, to this day. So, broadcasting has allowed me to accomplish, a lot of things. You get to go to these places, and I covered this or whatever you want to say, but it's the people. Like people say, worst and best part, and sometimes when the kids were younger, the travel was the worst part because you're missing out on a lot with your kids. But always the best part has been just the amount of people I've met, and not just the athletes that I've met or interviewed, but just the people that I've met along the way. It's been fantastic. I hope I can squeeze out another, 10 or so years.
I think you're good.
I hope so.
Your hair is going to stand the test of time. That's for sure.
It's not going anywhere, and hopefully neither am I.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to just end on this. I want to set the scene for you. It's like mid-90s. You're doing CKND half-hour show. Larry Walker hits a home run.
Oh, yeah. What's
your line?
Well, I would say you can butter that one. It is toast.
I love it. I have loved that. I think when I applied for a job at 8 Channel one time, I think I used that line trying to curry favor with you.
You know what? I love that line. I don't get to use it anymore.
No.
It doesn't really work in hockey, but when I was doing the sports 25 or so years ago for a home run, I just... it's a very simple thing, but boy, it was my personal. And then you can butter that one. It is like you can really hit it as hard as you want, right? The bigger the home run.
Yes.
If it's a playoff series or World Series compared to June 20th.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of my own personal favorite that unfortunately has kind of been put on the shelf and I don't get to use. So thank you for letting it come back out.
Thank you for spending some time with me out here, Gene. You've always been a good friend. Even, when I first left Global and I wasn't telling anybody what was going on, you would just call and say, I don't care. I just want to check in. Yeah. You've always checked in with our family. I thought you spoke so passionately about your mother at her service. So you've always been a great friend to me, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come out here and help me in Podcast Alley.
Anytime.
Gene Principe of Rogers Sportsnet on Sports and More, the podcast.
What do you say when your family goes away? Who do you know when you got nowhere to go?
This is the Sports and More podcast with Dean Millard.
Got nothing to drink. How do you smile when you're no longer a child?
That was such a fun conversation with Gene Principe. Seriously, the nicest guy I've ever met in media. He's just absolutely awesome. Okay, so we were up for grabs. We told you before that you can get a gift card from Acme Meat Market just for participating. That's what we're doing now. So we have a gift card up for grabs. You can use it at their beautiful shop in the Ritchie Market, 9570 76th Avenue. Check out their website, acmemeatmarket.ca. Since 1921. And their butcher man, the main guy, at Corey the Butcher, which is his Twitter handle, he's going to the World Butchers Challenge in September of 2020. So basically you're getting it from the Mark Messier of Butchers. So here's the trivia question. where you can get your hands on a gift card from Acme Meat Market. What was Gene's catchphrase when he was a sports anchor and a home run was hit? What was his catchphrase, we just talked about it, that he would use when somebody smacked a home run? Hit us up, sportsandmorepod@gmail.com. That is sportsandmorepod@gmail.com, or get us at Duck Millard or any of our other social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, and so on. That's going to wrap things up. Big thanks to Gene Principe, who joined the program today and had a lot of fun sharing some stories. Really appreciate Gene's time. If you would like to be a part of the show, please let me know. As an advertiser, if you think you'd make a good guest, drop me a line at sportsandmorepod@gmail.com. That's sportsandmorepod@gmail.com. We have lots of good opportunities coming up for advertisers, especially with the video production now. Please enjoy the show. I hope you did. Please subscribe if you do, and leave us a review. It is really, really important for us to know how to make this show a lot better. All right. Signing off from the Marsh at Podcast Alley. This has been Sports and More. Big thanks to Gene Principe of Roger Sportsnet. Playtime is over.
What do you say when your family goes away? Who do you know when you got nowhere to go?
This is the Sports and More podcast with Dean Millard.
Got nothing to drink.